part: the academics of AI and leadership. What the research actually says and what popular narratives get wrong. Let's go beyond the hype to understanding AI and leadership. Most conversations about AI and leadership are loud, confident, and shallow. They revolve around tools, trends, and predictions. They promise transformation without explaining mechanisms. They speak in futures without grounding themselves in evidence. But the academic research takes a very different view. In universities, research labs, and peer-reviewed journals, AI is not discussed as a miracle or a menace. It is studied as a socio-technical system, a combination of technology, human behavior, organizational structure, and power dynamics. Leadership in this context is not treated as charisma or vision, but as a decision-making function embedded in complex systems. To understand how AI changes leadership, we must begin here, not with tools, but with theory. Let's look at leadership as a cognitive function. At its core, leadership has always been cognitive before it was social. Long before leadership was associated with motivation, inspiration, or culture, it served a simpler purpose: to make decisions under uncertainty on behalf of a group. Leaders emerged because human groups needed someone to interpret incomplete information, predict future outcomes, allocate scarce resources, and resolve ambiguity. Classical leadership theories, whether trait-based, behavioral, or situational, assumed a fundamental asymmetry. Leaders had superior cognitive capacity, either through intelligence, experience, or position. But AI destabilizes this assumption. From a cognitive science perspective, AI systems are not intelligent in the human sense. They do not understand meaning, intention, or morality, but they excel at something leadership relies on heavily: pattern recognition at scale. Academic research increasingly shows that in environments characterized by high complexity, rapid feedback loops, large data volumes, weak signals, human cognition performs poorly. Not because humans are flawed, but because human cognition evolved for survival in small groups, not for navigating algorithmic markets and global systems. AI thrives precisely where human intuition breaks down. Decision science and the collapse of intuition. One of the most important contributions to leadership research over the past 50 years has come from decision science. Scholars have repeatedly demonstrated that human decision-making is riddled with biases: overconfidence, confirmation bias, availability bias, loss aversion, and status quo bias, etc. In stable environments, experience can partially compensate for these biases. In volatile environments, experience often amplifies them. AI systems, when designed and governed well, do not eliminate bias, but they change its nature. Algorithms are biased in different ways. Their biases are traceable, auditable, and correctable, at least in principle. Human biases are rarely any of these. From an academic standpoint, this creates a leadership paradox. Leaders are expected to make final decisions, yet in many domains, AI predictions outperform expert judgment, algorithmic recommendations reduce error rates, data-driven decisions outperform intuition-based ones. The research does not suggest replacing leaders with algorithms. It suggests something more uncomfortable: leaders who ignore algorithmic input systematically underperform those who integrate it. This shifts leadership from being a source of answers to being a curator of decision processes. Let's take a look at augmented intelligence versus autonomous intelligence. One of the most misunderstood distinctions in AI research is the difference between augmented intelligence and autonomous intelligence. Popular discourse often frames AI as either a tool that supports humans or a replacement for humans. But academic research rejects this binary. Augmented intelligence refers to systems designed to enhance human judgment by expanding cognitive capacity, surfacing patterns humans would miss, and reducing cognitive load. But on the other hand, autonomous intelligence refers to systems that act independently, make decisions without human intervention, and optimize toward predefined goals. Most leadership-relevant AI systems today fall somewhere between these extremes. The leadership challenge is not choosing one model over the other. It is deciding where autonomy is appropriate and where human judgment remains essential. This requires leaders to understand task complexity, risk tolerance, ethical implications, and systemic consequences. In academic terms, leadership shifts from decision-making to decision architecture. Here is the shift. We need to view organizations as complex adaptive systems. Traditional management theory treated organizations as machines. Inputs produced outputs. Problems could be isolated, and efficiency could be optimized. This was a system that served the industrial era, but not ideal for the knowledge era. Systems theory dismantled this view decades ago, but leadership practice largely ignored it. Force of habit, you can say. But AI makes it impossible to ignore. Modern organizations behave as complex adaptive systems. Small changes produce disproportionate effects, outcomes emerge rather than being engineered, and cause and effect are visible only in hindsight. AI both amplifies and reveals this complexity. When algorithms adjust pricing in real time, optimize supply chains, personalize customer experiences, and predict employee attrition, leadership can no longer rely on linear planning. Academic research consistently shows that in complex systems, control decreases effectiveness, prediction has limits, adaptation outperforms optimization. This reframes leadership as an ongoing process of sensing, learning, and adjusting, not commanding. So how do we make sense in the age of algorithms? One of the most critical leadership functions identified in organizational research is sense-making, the ability to construct meaning from ambiguous information. AI complicates sense-making in two ways. It produces outputs that are often statistically valid but conceptually opaque. Secondly, it accelerates the pace at which information changes. Leaders now face a paradox: more data than ever and less intuitive clarity than before. Research shows that when leaders do not understand how AI systems reach conclusions, they tend to either blindly trust them or completely dismiss them. Both responses are failures of leadership. Effective AI-era leadership requires epistemic humility, the ability to acknowledge what one does not know, combined with methodological literacy, the ability to ask the right questions about models, data, and assumptions. But there is one thing to be busted: the myth of AI neutrality. One of the most dangerous misconceptions in leadership circles is that AI is objective. Academic research is unequivocal on this point. AI systems encode human values, priorities, and power structures, whether intentionally or not. Data reflects historical decisions. Models optimize toward chosen outcomes. Metrics shape behavior. Leadership cannot outsource ethics to algorithms. In fact, AI raises the ethical stakes of leadership by scaling decisions, amplifying consequences, reducing visibility into judgment processes. This is why governance, accountability, and transparency emerge as central leadership responsibilities in AI-enabled organizations. The leader's role is not to understand code. It is to understand consequences. Let's look at what academic research really implies for leaders. When we synthesize findings from cognitive science, decision theory, systems thinking, and organizational behavior, a clear picture emerges. Leadership is no longer about superior intelligence. Authority cannot rest on experience alone. Decision-making must be designed, not dominated. Learning speed matters more than certainty. Ethical responsibility increases, not decreases. Bottom line, AI does not make leadership obsolete. It makes lazy leadership obsolete. Now, let's take a look at the gap between theory and practice. Despite the depth of academic insight, most organizations remain stuck in superficial engagement with AI. This gap exists because leadership development lacks research, incentives reward short-term performance, identity resistance blocks learning, and complexity is uncomfortable. Bridging this gap requires leaders to do something rare: study. Not trends, not tools, but ideas. The academic foundation laid in this part prepares us for the most difficult sections of this course, because once leaders understand what AI actually does to cognition, decision-making, and systems, they are forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Much of what we call leadership today is no longer fit for purpose. In the next part, we will examine this truth directly. We will explore what leaders must unlearn, not as a matter of preference, but as a matter of survival.